By the seventh day, the city no longer smelled like smoke. That was the first thing Axel noticed as he stood just inside the revolving doors of the hotel, listening to the sound of nothing in particular. No sirens, no engines, no voices raised in panic. Just wind, pushing discarded paper along the pavement like something alive but indecisive. Manchester had settled into itself. The outbreak, whatever it truly was, had burned hot and fast. Screams, fires, running crowds, the sick way people turned on one another. Then, like a storm passing through, it moved on. Or maybe it didn't move at all. Maybe it simply finished what it came to do. Axel adjusted the strap of the rucksack on his shoulder and took a slow breath. The air was cold, early morning damp, heavy with the promise of rain. Northern weather didn't care about the end of the world. It never had. 7 days ago, he'd arrived here on a crowded train from the Midlands, half asleep, annoyed at the delay outside Stockport, already thinking about the long shift ahead. Retail work was a way to pay the bills. Nothing more. He'd planned to be home by the weekend. That was before the shouting started in Piccadilly Station. Before people began biting. Before the internet went dark, one website at a time, like lights blinking out across a distant hill. Before phone calls failed. Before electricity flickered and died. Before the hotel television dissolved into static and stayed that way. Before the world went quiet. Axel stepped outside. Glass crunched beneath his boots as he crossed the pavement. Somewhere down the street, a shop alarm let out a single tired chirp, and then gave up. He paused, listening. Nothing followed. He preferred it this way. Silence meant survival. He moved carefully, long strides measured, scanning reflections in shop windows, doorways, the shadows beneath parked cars. At 6'3", athletic and broad-shouldered, he had learned quickly how to make himself smaller when needed. You didn't survive a week by being brave. You survived by being observant. His glasses slipped slightly down his nose. He pushed them back into place, a habit he hadn't broken even now. Without them, the world blurred at the edges, details smearing together in a way that made his temples throb. He couldn't afford that yet. Not today. Today he was leaving Manchester. The hotel had been safe enough. High floors, stairwells instead of lifts, locked doors. He'd rationed food carefully, dry cereal, bottled water, whatever he could scavenge without drawing attention. But staying meant waiting, and waiting meant dying slowly. Home was south. Home was his girlfriend, whose face he kept seeing in reflections that weren't there. Home was his 19-year-old, old enough to understand fear, young enough to be reckless. Home was his 16-month-old, who would have no memory of a world before this. The thought tightened something in his chest. They might be alive. That possibility, fragile, unproven, was the engine that kept him moving. Axel headed toward the railway lines first. Not because he expected trains to run, but because tracks were honest. They went somewhere. Roads twisted, flooded, clogged with abandoned vehicles. Tracks cut through cities and countryside alike, indifferent to panic. The station itself was a ruin. He approached from the side entrance, stepping over a toppled bike rack and a scattering of shoes, single shoes, always single, never pairs. He avoided looking too closely. He'd learned what happened when you did. Inside, the air was stale. The wide concourse echoed his footsteps back at him in a way that made his skin crawl. Departure boards hung dark and useless. Luggage lay where it had fallen, wheels snapped, handles torn away. A body slumped against a ticket machine. Axel stopped. He waited. No movement. He moved on. The platforms beyond were worse. Blood darkened the concrete in wide arcs, dried and black. A train sat frozen halfway in, doors open, windows smashed. Something had been dragged across the platform, leaving a smear that ended abruptly near the edge. Axel swallowed and kept walking. He didn't need to imagine what had happened. He'd seen enough in the first days. The infected weren't fast, not really, but they were relentless. They followed sound, movement, heat. They gathered, they overwhelmed, and once bitten, it didn't take long. He checked his watch out of habit. It had stopped 3 days ago. Figures, he murmured, voice low, unused. There would be no trains. He'd known that. Still, seeing it confirmed settled something in him. The route home would be on foot, with detours, improvisation, and luck. He turned away from the station and headed south. By midday, clouds rolled in, flattening the light into a dull grey wash. Axel walked through empty neighborhoods, past terraced houses with doors hanging open, past gardens gone wild in the span of a week. Somewhere, a radio played faintly, repeating the same fragment of a song until the battery finally died. His head began to ache. It started as a pressure behind his eyes, familiar and unwelcome. He blinked hard, adjusted his glasses again. Stress, dehydration, lack of sleep. He'd dealt with worse. Still, it worried him. Pain slowed thinking, slowed reactions, and in this world, slowness killed. He ducked into a hardware shop in the afternoon, its front window smashed but untouched beyond that. Inside, he moved with purpose. Tools calmed him, familiar shapes, solid weight. He selected a crowbar, tested its balance, nodded once, and added it to his pack. A handful of screws, duct tape, a box cutter. Crafting was second nature to him, always had been. Give him scraps and time, and he'd make something useful. A weapon, a barrier, a solution. Outside again, he paused as a distant sound carried on the wind. A groan. Low, wet, directionless. Axel froze, every muscle taut. Another sound answered it. Closer. He turned slowly, scanning the street. At the far end, a figure shuffled into view. Then another, and another. They hadn't seen him yet. He backed away, quiet as breath, slipping into a side street. Then another, heart pounding but controlled. He didn't run. Running drew attention. By the time night fell, he had put miles between himself and the city center. He slept in the shell of a bus, curled on a seat with his rucksack clutched to his chest, crowbar within reach. Rain drummed softly on the roof. The sound reminded him of nights at home, of lying awake listening to weather move across the estate. Before sleep took him, one thought repeated, steady as a heartbeat. I'm coming. Chapter 2. Wilmslow in the rain. The rain came down hard enough to sting. Axel trudged forward with his head lowered, water streaming from his hair, down his collar, soaking through layers that had long since given up pretending they could keep him warm. Every step sent a dull ache through his legs. Hunger gnawed at him with a persistence that bordered on pain now. Sharp, hollow cramps that left him lightheaded if he stopped moving for too long. When the sign emerged from the grey, he almost missed it. Wilmslow, 1 mile. He stopped beneath it, rain rattling against the metal like thrown gravel. For a long moment, he just stood there, chest rising and falling, water dripping from his nose. His glasses were slick with rain, but he didn't wipe them. The world stayed clear enough. Wilmslow meant food, water, shelter, if only briefly. Crew came after that. Crew meant tracks, real ones. Tracks he'd memorized years ago on tired commutes and bored glances out train windows. Tracks that would carry him all the way back to Stafford, back to where his family should be. The thought tightened his throat. He hadn't eaten properly in over a day. What little water he had left sloshed uselessly at the bottom of one bottle. His head throbbed faintly now, a pressure behind his eyes that he recognized all too well, a headache waiting to bloom. "You'll manage," he muttered, more habit than belief. The town was too quiet. Wilmslow looked untouched at first glance. Cars parked neatly, windows intact, a postbox overflowing with damp letters. It felt like everyone had simply gone inside and never come back out. That kind of quiet was dangerous. Axel moved carefully, sticking to the edges of streets, avoiding open spaces. He passed a bakery, its display still full of long-molded bread, a pharmacy, a small convenience shop tucked between a charity shop and a shuttered takeaway. That was where he went in. The back door was already ajar. Inside, the air was stale, thick with rot and sugar. He moved fast now, hunger sharpening him. Bottled water first, he twisted the cap and drank greedily, then forced himself to slow, gasping as nausea threatened. Food next. Tins, biscuits, chocolate crushed into soft lumps but still edible. He stuffed what he could into his bag, heart hammering. Not from fear yet, but urgency. That was when he heard it. Footsteps, fast, too fast. Axel turned just as the infected slammed through the doorway. It didn't stumble. It didn't drag itself forward with the dull inevitability he'd come to expect. It ran. The thing had once been a man. Now its movements were sharp, frantic, powered by something feral and relentless. Its eyes locked onto him instantly. Its mouth opened wide and it screamed. Not a moan, not a groan, but a raw, furious sound that ripped straight through Axel's chest.